Today we have for our interview on Everything HR another great speaker, Perry Timms. Perry, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you. I had a fantastic day yesterday, so yes, feeling good.
Tell us a little bit about you, please.
Sure. So for 21 years now, I've been working in the HR profession, and it's a profession I love, and I have an enormous amount of positivity about. For the last 12 years, I've founded and I'm the Chief Energy Officer of People and Transformational HR.
Sounds great.
Yeah, we're a consultancy that help organisations with their design, their flow, but ultimately our outcome, I guess, is to create better business for a better world, and so people in their work flourish.
I heard something yesterday in your presentation, and I liked it very much. It sounds like we are going from managing employment to orchestrating work.
Yeah.
Can you develop a little bit?
I can. Work as we know it is still largely recognisable from the industrial era. A contract with one employer, with a specific job, built around certain skills and capabilities. And the modern world says, not so sure that's relevant anymore. So the orchestrating work thing is really talking about how the nature of work in many organisations, whether they're manufacturing, service, education, health, logistics, is largely about projects. Things which are solving a problem or creating an opportunity, and that work doesn't sit neatly in jobs anymore. It requires different capabilities along a value chain. It requires different speed, different depth of thought. So the construct of job was replicable, scalable simplification, and the world is not like that anymore. It is far more complex.
Yeah. You know about VUCA.
I do.
It sounds like VUCA.
Yeah.
It is, actually. But I think it's more than that.
Yeah, I think VUCA has been introduced, rightly so, because of the volatility and uncertainty, right? And I think even if we look since the pandemic, which was a complete game changer, that we have economic crisis, war, pressure on the environment, social unrest, political challenges. I think VUCA is almost not adequate enough to describe almost like the cluster of problems that we now have. And in my talk yesterday, I kind of brought that to bear, that there are so many things. And I had the essence that what HR particularly is being asked to do is do everything, everywhere, all at once. With all of those problems, we almost seem to have more problems than we can cope with. So work is kind of ballooning out as a result of that. So it's harder to make decisions when you need to make quick decisions. So it almost feels like everything's going against us. So it's like VUCA, but like amplified and strengthened.
I think we can add a little more, maybe another A or two A's from authenticity we heard. It was another one with A, you said it earlier.
Automation.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah. Those you're right, have stretched the thinking even further. I think authenticity talks to our thirst, I think, to discover who we are in a fast-paced, mechanistic, consumable world. We've lost a sense of identity and relevance and belonging, so that's where the authenticity comes in. And automation just seems to be accelerating, particularly the rate of digitization and the change through technology, that we can actually find confusing because we don't have time to integrate and learn to master.
So the third day, I think it's adaptability.
Adaptability, completely. It is almost like that is the crucial skill to wrap around absolutely everything. So when I work with organizations, I'm almost tuning in for leaders that show adaptability. But sadly, I have to deal with a lot of leaders who are rooted in traditionality. And it will kill the business if they aren't adaptable, because it needs to be adaptable to change, almost to the point that it will never be a solid state again. Liquidity, mercurial, fluidity. And that is all about responding to the needs of people who come to work there and people who need to consume the goods and services, but also the market, the environment, the regulators, the legislation. So the pressures from outside on businesses are huge, and that trickles into internal. And of course, when people leave the workplace and go home, they have pressures at home.
Of course.
Parenting, society, cost of living. So it feels like we're in a constant pressure chamber. Now, one of the things I have seen is where people find a calling or a sense of purpose, it starts to really diminish the impact of those pressures to the point that people can go, but I'm doing it because I am responding to something that's important to me. And that's where, again, it comes back to authenticity, because that's authentic to you and very unique. And I think what we're seeing in the conference today, particularly, and yesterday, is there's that thirst to find it, to define it, and to target your activity's energy and attention towards it. And as well as adaptability, within that is learning, because that is part of adaptability, right? And I think we are now starting to see that programmatic learning, as we used to do it, well, still do it in education and in work, it's not timely enough, it's too heavy, it isn't sufficiently modernised. And so people are having to adapt and learn in the flow of work. And what I really like about an event like this is it brings people together who can share all those stories and experiences. And we just learn in real time. Sadly, learning is seen to be an activity that isn't work because you take yourself away from work, but learning is work, because without that learning, your work suffers. And we just heard from a speaker about, standing still is actually going backwards.
Yeah.
So we have to keep a constant sense of perpetual motion.
Yeah. What tools do you think are proper to use, or maybe you are using, when you see that the leaders that you work for are not so open?
Right.
I understand it's their journey, but you have a job there.
Yeah.
So what are the tools that you can use or
so I think
strategies?
the first thing I like to do is find out about why there is potentially resistance or stubbornness or an inability to accept the need to change. And where I can probably pinpoint that is a state of fear and the anxiety that comes with it. So the tools you use there are understanding the psychology of human behaviour, about how we overcome fear, how we suppress fear, how we can take calculated risks, how we can experiment gently to prove a course of action is beneficial. So I often work with leaders in what I would call iterative sprints, just to sort of make some small progress, because it starts to loosen their resistance. So that's a tool, the psychology of human behaviour and change. And then I think when we look at the sciences, both in people and in data analytics, I think the data then becomes really important, because what we need to do is create evidence that the changes we're proposing and the impacts that we're having is the right one, is the strongest one. And so that's where we need to have really sophisticated dashboards, showing people value, social value, financial value, and even natural value. And I think when we can start to bring those in, the loosening of the restriction of fear and the logic process of the data, you can see an embodied and visible shift in how leaders then want to be. They want to become more visionary, they want to become more inspirational, and they want to steward the change and captain that team. And I think that's where they then find their true calling. It's ironic, isn't it, that we call them a chief executive, almost like they are a super administrator. And that's why I call myself a chief energy officer, because they should energize the organisation to make the best of its assets, to absolutely care for its people in harmony to produce great results. So I think that's where we see a visible shift. So I think it is human science and data science is really the two things that I think we can deploy that will convince leaders to step away from fear or resistance into much more experimental, pioneering ways of working.
Yeah, interesting. I heard yesterday something similar with what you said, changing the acronyms.
Yeah.
And we are looking forward for one for HR, because it's not going human resources, not anymore.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked about this yesterday in a question. I mean, there's a kind of playful reframe of human resourceful, which is slightly different because we're talking about the resourcefulness of humans. But my explanation was to not worry about HR as a label and commit HR as a practice field, like the law and finance and research. But to call ourselves as practitioners, organisation designers, people professionals, strategic people partners, talent, I think those are the words that absolutely represent now. And I think if I'm a young professional coming into it, and I see the words talent and people and strategy and consultant and design, I'm going to think much more favourably than advisor and so on, right? Because they feel like they are still so heavily regulatory. They are keeping the organisation so tight and they're not loosening it up to explore the future. So I think we can start to bring that language in. People professionals, people partners, people strategists, organisation designers, talent learning, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Fascinating. Thank you very much. We can talk for hours, but we don't have so many hours to talk today. But looking forward to meet you again.
Thank you.
At our conferences or maybe other events.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.